You asked about the weather.
Yeah.
Okay, so did I send you that the SNL sketch, the George Washington?
Nate Bargatze.
Oh, Nate Bargatze with the
when
weights and measures
When
and
I
the
watched
degrees
that,
Celsius.
I
yeah.
literally, like, I hadn't laughed that hard at an SNL.
But-
I showed Bill, and he absolutely loved it. And so now
That's a good one.
he's like, "You asked about the weather." Anytime I pause
Yes,
in reference
okay.
to
No,
it,
I did
Okay.
not. Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
that's his bit at the end, right?
yeah.
And the other one I think is hilarious was just released. Do you not see the gentleman sitting behind
Have
you
seen
dressed as
the Beavis
Beavis?
and Butthead sketch with Ryan Gosling?
No.
Oh,
I haven't seen any of the Ryan
good.
Gosling sketches. I've
That
heard
was a
they're
good
great.
episode. They
I
were
haven't
all
watched
good.
it.
that's rich. That one.
I'm so busy praying on Saturday nights.
Oh my gosh.
Just don't give me that. Come on.
You're listening to the Restoration Podcast, conversations of hope and healing. Join us as we talk about subjects dealing with ministry, faith, everyday life, and other hot topics. Our prayer is that these conversations bring encouragement to your life.
All right.
So I'm curious, how many years of worship pastorship do we have collectively? You did it for how long?
It was either 13 or 14 years.
Let's say 14. And
Okay.
then you did
What
it
year did
for
you show up?
I started in like
1960.
Yeah, stop. 60. Yeah. So
I'm kidding.
Just walk out.
Yeah, I'm done. Goodbye.
See you guys.
I actually started in 2001
Okay.
as a part timer,
Okay.
and then in 2003 they put me on full time staff.
Okay.
So if you want to go back to that history, it's 2001. So
Officially.
yeah, and then Ben came on in 2017.
Yep.
So that's 16
That's
years.
16 years.
Okay, then how long did you?
I was officially on from March of 2017 until August of 21.
So let's say
when
four.
you showed
That's
up.
20.
Yeah, really
And
4
I've been
years.
here for almost 3. So this is 23
23
collective
years.
years of
23 years.
worship, leadership
amazing.
stuff. Yeah. So
And we're all still in the same room.
I know. So let me touch on that for people listening and like who are these people? So I am the current worship pastor here at Restoration Church.
Yes.
I got here in August 2021. And this guy right here was my predecessor. So
was.
Ben was the worship pastor before me.
Yeah.
So when he got called to, there's another episode you can watch where he talks about his story to do what he's doing now, lead pastor in Elk Point, South Dakota. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So since he did that, someone had to step up, so I came. Well, before Ben, it was this guy,
That's
Pastor
me.
Bill.
Yep.
He was here for the longest, as we just said, 16 years.
Yeah.
So here's what's funny is I first met both of you. Well, I don't know about you. I met you 10 years ago
Yes.
because I was dating Pastor Johnny's daughter, and I would come visit, and you were the worship pastor at that time.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I've known you for like 10 years.
Yeah.
Crazy, isn't it?
It is.
I don't remember when I met you.
I don't remember
It
either.
wasn't a very
We
memorable.
were probably
no.
in the same. I'm sure it wasn't. I started attending though in 2014. So
yeah,
it's
we-
been
yeah,
10
we
years
discussed
since
that.
then. So like
He was
We were
still in
probably in the
charge though.
room.
You were probably like in the booth or something.
either in the booth or,
Or
just playing guitar in the
Or playing
corner,
guitar, yeah.
or just
He joined the team for a while.
Yeah.
It's just funny. The Lord's funny because like I met you guys back then. Like, oh, that's so cool. The worship pastor, whatever. And little did I know I'd be on staff with you. Like
Right.
the Lord's funny. The way
Right.
He
Yeah.
works.
And if I remember right, you said the first Sunday you visited, I did a Spanish song.
You know. Okay, so that is hilarious.
Yeah.
So yes. So when the very first time I visited, one of the songs on your set list was "Te doy gloria," give you glory.
Oh,
Yeah.
And so it was
yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
awkward because you went into the Spanish, and as you did that, my future in-laws were like looking at me like,
That's
"This
awesome.
is for
We
you."
good?
You
We
know.
good? You're
Yeah,
welcome.
that's awesome.
And so
You're
why that's
welcome.
funny is because it's like you did that small taste, and then now 10 years later we have a fully
Bilingual
bilingual
service.
service every Sunday where
Yeah.
we do Spanish every week.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty
I
insane.
never put that puzzle piece together.
Me neither
That's
till
wild.
now. Isn't that
Crazy.
crazy?
That is
the
wild.
Lord
So-
is pretty.
So you
pretty
go
cool.
back to that. I mean, you think about the 16 years I was here. I plowed a lot of ground.
Yeah,
Right.
you did.
We went through like the worship wars.
Yeah,
and,
he
and that
fought
stuff.
the worship war
So
single-handedly.
he did everything,
just
all the
gotta hand
hard
him
work,
his
so that me and
flowers.
Ben could just walk in.
Yeah, I walked in. I was like, "Let's just have some fun."
Yeah.
That's funny.
And
This
Ben
is
comes in,
easy.
that pendulum swings
Exactly.
way this way,
Yeah,
and then,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
So it was a lot of fun.
What's nice is that you stewarded it so well that I was able to come in and just kind of break some things.
Mm-hmm.
And my hope is that I was that little. You know, every church needs that interim pastor to kind of just like come in and shake things up between the two people that are
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
supposed to be doing the
Yeah.
job.
That's
like,
funny.
Yeah.
It's almost how I feel in retrospect now, where I was like,
Sure.
I was useful for a season,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're bringing a pendulum back to the middle.
Kind of in the middle, yeah.
Between where we were. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool that you get to look at the large macro scope like that, because most places where you have the job, you have no idea. Like, you may know the name of the previous person,
Right.
but you haven't stood on a stage with them. You haven't sat in a room with them. you
Which
don't
we
know.
have played together multiple times.
Yes.
So for
Yes.
like a Good Friday service or Pentecost Sunday PM special
Yes.
evening, all
Yes.
three of us have been on the same platform. I
Yes.
think that's pretty unique.
It's very.
I don't know
unique.
many other churches who
It's
have
very unique.
previous worship pastors. I mean, maybe they like come visit or whatever. Even thinking of like my previous church, like, I mean, with an exception, they're not around. Like once they're done, they've relocated, so to speak. And so
Yeah.
you've relocated, but just in the same building.
Yeah,
different
switch
office.
jobs. Yeah, that's right.
Well, I
Yeah.
think it's interesting to note that most people have a job at a church and then go get that same or a different job at a different church.
Right.
But I think not only are we standing in an interesting legacy, but we're standing in the fact that our boss, Pastor Johnny, has been like gracious enough to allow you to step into where you needed to be,
Right.
and to allow me to step into where I needed to be, and that then allowed
Well,
you to step
me
into
as
where
well.
you need to be.
This bilingual service thing
Yes,
is kind of
yes,
something that I
yeah,
took
absolutely.
on, and so it's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
So if you don't have a leadership or a church culture that is willing to promote people from within, which a lot of church cultures are just like, well, we need an executive pastor. Bill's doing great at worship pastor.
Let's
It'd be
keep
too
him
much of a
there.
hassle
Yeah.
to move him and then bring this guy. So let's just hire a new executive. Instead, Johnny was like, well, let's go through the tough
Yeah.
process of raising someone up from within. And I
Yeah.
think that's the healthiest model of leadership, is raise
Yeah.
people up from within, equip people up from within, and then set them off to do what they're called to do.
Yeah.
And I think we're sitting in that legacy as much
Definitely.
as anything
Yeah,
we've done.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So Ben was on earlier. We talked through his story, and I was very early talked about mine. You haven't really had a dedicated episode where you talk about
No,
where
but
you came
that's
from,
that's
so-
coming up, from what I understand. So
coming
so,
soon.
Yeah, coming soon.
But could you like how did you land in being the worship pastor here? Like how did you start ministry and stuff like that?
Okay, there were two previous worship pastors to my hiring. Okay, one was Tony Herbeck, and he did a phenomenal job. And then Tony ended up going on back into the business world. And then we had Barry Leibengood that was out of Minnesota. And Barry had served years with Lowell Lundstrom Crusade. And so Barry was here, and he kind of filled in as an interim in a sense, but then just didn't feel like he, this was his calling for the long haul. So then he went back to Minnesota, where he came down from. At that point, I filled in between the two as worship leader when they were doing the transitions, and then after Barry left, I was doing it at that time. And then I remember Tom Jacobs stopped by the office I was working at on some music
The
back
previous
in one,
lead pastor.
Yes,
Yeah.
previous before Pastor Johnny, and stopped at my office. He says, "You got lunch plans?" I said, "Well,
That
no,
make
I
you
don't.
nervous?
What do you?" Yeah, it does. Hey, you got time for
When
lunch?
your boss is like, "Hey,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, and another one that makes me nervous is, "Hey, you got a minute?"
Oh gosh.
So.
Can you do me a favor? Okay,
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah. Anyways, so he stopped by. He says, "You got lunch plans?" And I said, "Well, no, not really." I said, "Why? What do you got in mind?" He says, "We need to discuss your position here." And
Interesting
I
way to
was,
word that.
Yeah, I was blown away. And I'd always felt called to ministry all my life.
Okay.
But my parents told me growing up that if you could do anything else in life and be happy, then do that. But
Before
if you can't,
ministry.
That's a classic pastor's kid.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
funny.
right. You're a preacher's kid.
You're-
Yeah,
We're both
Yeah.
preacher's kids. My dad
Yeah.
said the same thing when I was considering this. He said, if you can do anything else
yeah.
and be okay with yourself,
Yeah.
do anything else. But if it's what you want to do, my dad had the caveat. It's like, it's wonderful if that's what you're called to.
Right.
If you can't do anything else, don't do it. So you're taping houses before that, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I've been an optician. I've been, built eyeglasses. I had a woodworking
know
shop,
that.
custom woodworks out of my house for years, and then taped and textured drywall for many years after that. And the Lord got a hold of me in a profound way. and that'll come out in my story.
This is all a teaser for
So,
his
We could-
episode.
Listen, this should just be Bill's story for now.
oh no. This is the three of us. And so then that was my calling, and I started to pursue it. Actually, it happened here on the platform, and so very unique, very very life altering, and then. Pastor Tom Jacobs helped me pursue my credentials and get through that, and then the rest of that is getting up to this point. So it's been an incredible journey. But the thing that's really unique in this whole thing that I am just like I said earlier, you don't see this.
Yeah.
Where you have three worship pastors still remaining on site in play. Getting along together, okay? Because, like you said, most people when they switch churches or jobs, that they go
somewhere.
Yeah, the next guy leaves to give the other guy a chance, and
I think a lot of people think of it like track and field.
yeah,
It's like I run my 400, and that's all I care about. And we've got like a mixed relay, or
Yeah.
you ran a distance,
Yeah.
and you handed it off to me, and
Yeah.
we're like, go. And then I was able to hand it off
Yeah.
to you and say, go. And I think most people aren't interested in handing the baton to anyone else.
The other unique
They
thing
wanna go.
about this is since when you came, you were still here.
Yeah.
And then when I came, you were still here. So the time between you and you was smooth, I'm assuming, because he was able to just hand over things
Yeah.
and explain this and that.
Well,
And then when
yeah.
I came, same thing. You were here for like, I think 6 months or something. And you were like slowly letting go of the reins. And eventually it was pretty smooth. Whereas it wasn't like for either me or you, Ben, it wasn't just like you start here, I'm
Right.
gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think it's great that you have a bank of not only my experience, but also Bill's experiences too. Like
It's really unique.
it's like having the user manual of like how to
Yeah.
the troubleshooting bank of like
Yeah.
the things we've tried and the things we've screwed up is the list, at least for me personally, the
Yeah.
list is so long.
Oh
that
my
I can
gosh.
tell you like, hey, well, here's
I've
the way
got
I
a
tried
pretty
it.
long list of
Here's the way I tried
failures
it,
as
it didn't
well.
work.
there's a lot of things
We all
we
do,
tried
right?
and didn't
Yeah.
didn't
Or
make
it's
happen.
like, hey, we did that for a season. It was great. We just moved on
Let's
from
bring
it.
it back.
Yeah, I want to bring it back.
Let's bring it back.
Cool. Here's
Yeah.
how you do it. It's right there in front of you. But the one thing that's I think it's interesting about my transition, at least, is just it was such a gradual transition. I almost didn't notice. By the time we got to it, it was almost like
So natural,
obviously,
yeah.
Because I started playing in 2014, in 2015, 2016. I'm just a guy on the platform. But when did they announce that you were moving into the executive role? Was that 15?
Yeah, I believe it was
that
something
close.
like that.
Oh,
But
sure.
we
Bad mic technique on a worship
Come on, you're a
pastor.
worship pastor. You should
Anyway, continue.
you and I had a conversation though, because we were talking about this, and Pastor Johnny and I talked about transitioning me out of that role, and you I remember you and I sitting in my office, and I was asking you about your calling.
Yeah.
And then I talked to you about global
Yep.
classes and so forth.
So I was just finishing up my music degree at Morningside
That's right.
University, and I was like, there was no obvious next step for me. But when I'm like doing the kind of the divine math, if you will, looking back over my story, I'm like, I've always loved music. I'm always serving in the church, and I've always felt a call to ministry. And but again, if you can do anything else. So I had tried 5 other things. I was like mowing lawns, I think, at the time for Lance. And, I knew that was not a calling on my life. So 2015, I'm not like lost and aimless spiritually, but I was at a nexus moment where I'm like, I could go a lot of different directions. And it was at that moment where Bill and I had hours and hours and hours of conversations in his office over all sorts of different things.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a classic mentorship role where I would call Bill my first ministry mentor.
Oh,
period.
wow, thank you.
I mean, other than my dad, or you know how it is when you're a
Yeah.
pastor's kid, like you have the picture of dad for your whole life is kind of there. But as far as a minister who sat down with me, he was my team leader and was working with me. And it was less about like, here's how you develop good skills. And it was more about like the 80-20 rule of like, it's 80% people, 20% stuff.
He told me the same
talked
line.
about
We say that again. So what is
He
the
didn't even know what
80-20
it is.
thing?
Yeah. So this role at music pastor
Yep.
is 80% people and 20% music.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. Because all these guys, and if anybody out there is listening to this and you're wanting to go into music ministry,
Yes.
you get this in your head because it is just that. If you don't take care of the people, you don't have music.
Yep.
Yep.
And the 20% is just the technical aspects of it
Yep.
and what you do as a job, but
Yeah.
but the 80% is taking care of the people.
Yeah. And I know worship pastors who are like, yeah, I spent 6 hours yesterday just praying over that night's worship set. And I went, you went 6 hours on the music? I went, you wasted 80% of it.
Yeah.
It's like you could have been talking to your team. You could have been thinking about it the next
Connecting,
volunteer. You could
Yeah.
but things like that, feeding me books like The Way of the Shepherd,
Oh my
feeding,
gosh, that's a great
taking
book.
his team through all sorts of different things, that I'm on the receiving end of that. And then there was an interesting 2-year window where you're going to be the executive, but you were basically spinning plates.
I was spinning plates.
You were beginning to eat up some of the executive stuff, which at the time your portfolio was more like life groups, things like that.
Christian education.
Yeah, just discipleship
Red carpet,
stuff.
yeah.
And I watched you. Your portfolio was expanding and expanding to critical mass, to the point where you're in your office slaving over stuff, and then like into rehearsal, into putting the music hat on,
Yeah.
and then running right back out. And I'm like, I think after about 2 years, I'll let you tell the story, but you went to Johnny and were like, hey, bud, we got to do something.
I said I need a date and a plan to get me transitioned,
Yep.
and I need it soon.
That's a lot,
And
even here.
It was, yeah. And so we were going to transition me out of that, but it took 2 years.
Yeah.
It just until we really sat down and hammered it out and looked at it. Yeah, man. Like you said, I was spinning plates and then
Yep.
just trying to keep everything afloat. Another thing back about the people thing, I'd say too is, you need to be more concerned about your people as a person than what they can do for you
Yes.
musically.
Absolutely.
In any team or any volunteer position, you need to care more about them than what they can do for you.
Yeah.
I remember an instance where we had a drummer that tried to do I think you were there, tried to do an opening for a song that we were talking about doing. He just couldn't handle it, and just couldn't get it out.
Yep.
And he was struggling. And finally, I just said, no, we're done. I said, and I walked over to him. I said, hey, don't worry about this. I said, you're more important to me than what you can do for me. So let's change, make a change. And we made a change in the music, and everything was great.
Yeah. You
So
were
I
the
had
one
a,
that
I had a
taught me-
recent
Go ahead.
revelation from the Lord. I can't tell you when it was, but I remember I was thinking about that. I was thinking about the team I'm blessed with, all these volunteers that are stepping up. And I remember thinking to myself, the Lord, as clear as day, told me, like, Aaron, when you come to the pearly gates, hopefully I make it to heaven, right? No, I will. I will.
Well, you live out those 14 fundamentals.
Oh my gosh, stop. Okay, so
There's 16.
moving right along. Watch the previous episode to
Yep,
get that,
it's a
or
callback.
whatever episode that was. Okay, so the Lord was like, Aaron, when you get to the pearly gates, I'm not going to ask, why did you not ask your sound engineer to take out the highs or the lows here? What the Lord may ask is, well, your volunteer was severely depressed and you never reached out.
Yeah.
And so from that
Yeah.
point forward, I vowed to do exactly what Bill just said, was care more about the people and who they are rather than what they can do for you.
Yeah.
So
The value of how are you doing is like incalculable in worship
Yeah.
ministry. Like Bill was I watched him model this, and then I've adopted it myself, even as a lead pastor now. It's like when someone shows up late, the first thing you say is, how are you doing? Are you okay? They walk in a huff. They're like, I'm so sorry. And you have two choices at that point. Or you have probably multitudinous choices, but at least two. One is, excuse me, practice began at 7:30. Why are you here at 7:42? Or you can go, how are you doing? You all right? Everything's good? Okay, cool. You weren't in a car accident? All right, no worries. Hey, we'll try to get here. Let's try to get here on time next time. But I'm just glad you're here. Glad you're okay. And at that point, you're either taking the person who you're shepherding, stewarding, and you're either going, I care about you, or you're going, I care about the rehearsal.
Yeah.
It's I care about you and your condition and how you are as a person, or I care about the organization and I care about the standard. And it's like, the more you care about the people well, the more they desire to follow the standard, to show up on time, to put in effort. And I think it's a testament to the fact that we still have people on the team today
Oh, that's
that were
another
with
thing.
Bill,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's
some,
amazing.
Some of these people, yeah.
and they've allowed themselves to be led and stewarded.
Yeah.
But like, I think Bill single-handedly established a culture here of like, we're going to care about each other as people.
Definitely.
Because I've been in places where it's like, oh, this is a This is a music factory.
Exactly.
We show up.
Churches that are that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We show up. We have a plan. We do the plan. I mean, I had a worship leader once who was like, if you're not plugged in 5 minutes before rehearsal, you don't play. And that was it was a rule that was ironclad. And we had some people that showed up 2 minutes late to practice, and he said, "Get out of here." And I went, I mean, I get it, but like, and they were like, "Really? You don't?"
What do you gain from that?
Yeah, you got to look at the bigger picture
Exactly.
at that point, honestly. And going back to what you said too, you know, there have been times where people come in with a huff and unload on
Yes.
me, and I just let them because I learned that they felt that I was a safe person to just
I was about to say that, yeah.
you know,
Because they get to know us really well.
yes, and can unload life stresses on you, and I learned not to take them personal.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
you
that's
just
hard to
can't.
do.
You just, yeah, sometimes it is. You know,
You have
but
to learn that pretty
yeah.
quick. That's the other thing too. If you're listening, considering being full-time music ministry, is it's music ministry. It's both. It's not just the music stuff. I mean,
That's
yes,
good,
you
yeah.
want to be a good musician, right? We're supposed to be the role model musician or whatever. We should know the charts. We should know every part. That's part of the job. But it's also a pastoralship. We have to be able to lead the people as well.
yes,
And it's not just about the music, but when your people go through things, you're the one. Like Bill just said, you establish a relationship with your worship and tech people, right?
Yeah.
Like you get to know them really well, their families really well. You celebrate wins with them, you mourn with them and all that stuff. And you just have to remember that you're not just called to lead a music rehearsal and a worship set. You're also there to lead those people.
Yep.
The music part it should be the easy part of the job, right?
Yeah.
Because that's why you got
Right.
hired or got considered hired to do that. It's the other stuff that you'll eventually learn how to do. And that took me a while to realize as well. I had the wrong emphasis at first. I was thinking, what's the most creative charts? How are we gonna, do the latest and greatest? How am I gonna
that's always-
outdo my predecessor? And I was brand new.
As a musician, that's always your first pull because
Yeah.
that's what excites you.
Sure, yeah.
You get excited about like, how can I make this the best music possible? And then you realize, I'm stepping on your story, but I'll hand it back.
Do it.
The best music possible is not necessarily the best worship possible.
Yep, definitely.
Like, there's a big distinction between leading people in worship and leading people in
Yep.
music, because you can lead really creative music, but you can't do creative worship. Worship is real simple.
Yeah.
It's people on their faces in front of
Yeah.
God. There's nothing new about worship.
Right.
But you can invent cool changes and do all the things, but like worship is pretty simple. Anyway, sorry, I didn't jump.
No, it's okay. And so I was thinking, what's the latest and greatest? What's flashy? All the things that young, new,
Yep.
first-time worship pastors think. Then after, I don't remember how long it was. After a while, I realized, I said, no, I need to invest in these people, empower them, be there for them, lead them, shepherd them. And in return, what I found was when I pull out a latest and greatest thing, they're more willing to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd like to also say too, just personally, this is kind of random, but I was a band teacher before this. So when I was a band teacher, it was in a small town. It was a program that really needed to be just taken apart and put back together. It was kind of a mess, and it was a great job. I loved it. I still miss being in the classroom. But I found that one of my strengths was showcasing other people's strengths. So
Yeah.
it was very difficult to pick repertoire for those kids because they had really big weaknesses in certain areas.
Yeah.
But then we had tiny strengths in other areas. So I leaned on those strengths. And I found that the same thing happens here as well. But you won't know what people's strengths are if you're not investing in them.
That's true.
You're
Yeah,
just gonna,
exactly.
if you just throw a bunch of random new latest and greatest charts, but you know that your keys player or bass player or drums can't do this or that, like it's not going to work, right? And so when you invest in the people, the 80% portion, the 20% just falls into place.
Yeah,
I remember when you told me that, and I called a friend. I was like, "Yeah, the previous worship pastor's still around," and he told me this, and he's like, "What? 80% people?" And he'll tell you. We call each other like every Friday, and I share what's going on. He shows what's going on. There's like, let me tell you, our conversations are not about music. That's
Yeah,
not what
they're
I
about
talk
people.
to him about, right?
Absolutely.
It's about the
Yeah.
people, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're absolutely right with that. You should write a book about that.
There's
I don't know
several
what you'd
books I should
call
write,
it,
Yeah.
but-
Yeah, you should. I think that it's so invaluable to keep the perspective because, right, it's music. There's like this core competency you need, but the anointing that you have is not to play great stuff on an instrument or to sing great songs. The anointing for music ministry is simply the ability to lead a team who leads a congregation.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
if you remember that you're leading a team who then leads a congregation, and you can't invest deeply into every congregant, but you can invest pretty reasonably deeply
Yeah,
into the
that's
core
good.
people that are around
Absolutely,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And when you do that well,
That's
when you
good.
invest in those people well, those people invest in the congregation well. And it's never perfect. And there's always
Really? Never
relationships.
perfect, huh?
There's always relationships
There's
that
always
are
something, yeah.
tense. There's always relational situations you're managing.
Yeah.
But that's just leading people. And so when you're leading your team well, which I think you're doing, you'll begin to notice that team begins to lead the congregation
Yeah.
well.
They'll do their
And
thing.
it's like it's automatic. There's no other way. So that's I would put that 80% people thing.
Whenever
I
I move on
think-
from here, if it's 2 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, you've been around for over 20 at this point. So we'll see. I will definitely tell that next person, hey, 80-20 rule, definitely. And like seriously grasp that sooner than later.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, it's really important. It really is.
I wanted to dive into more specific worship pastor stuff.
Let's do it.
So there were two main things I wanted to talk on a little bit. One was, you had touched on it, you were the worship pastor during the worship wars. So I'm assuming when you refer to that, you're talking about hymns were a big part of worship sets when you first started back in the 60s. I'm just kidding. That's the last time I'll do that.
60s.
I'm done. Okay, I'm kidding. So hymns were a big part, but then when you came on, it was that transitional time when hymns were going out, so to speak, and the worship choruses were coming in, correct? So we don't know what that's like. I mean, how old were we during then? Were we alive?
I was in the pew
Right.
for them at
But
my
as a child,
Baptist church,
you
but
know,
didn't
you
have
were
to
the
lead through
leader
it.
during that point. I'm assuming there had to have been tense moments and stuff. But what was that? What was that time like?
Sometimes scary. Honestly, you know, you know, and it was that point where you're transitioning from hymn books to words on a screen. You
Yeah,
know,
that's right.
And,
That's right.
And this was, I'm not old enough to have the overhead projectors.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, where they have the film and you lay it down
Yeah.
and it projects on the wall.
and you're moving it backwards
Yeah.
and you can't quite get it right.
I was when I was
The
leading
original
worship
presenter.
before we came here. I was leading worship at another church in town, and we had moved to creating slides. You know, the little
Yeah.
slides and the slide projector with the
Oh.
carousel
Little
to project.
shunk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to
Move
project
around.
on the walls.
Yes.
And
High tech for the
we,
time.
yeah, and we started doing that, and I had a lady and if you're a worship pastor out there, this is one thing you got to be careful of, is because the general public and the people in your congregation mean well. But they will catch you before service when you're trying to gather your thoughts
You
and
don't
going.
say.
You have a million things going on.
Yes, and trying to get things ready to go, and
Yeah.
and they will hit you sideways in ways that really catch you off guard. And this lady was really upset because we had put a screen on the side of the sanctuary for projecting these lyrics, and she thought it was the ugliest thing that there ever was, and on about it. And I said, you know what, I'm really sorry you feel that way, and I'm sorry that that's created these feelings for you.
Yeah.
I need to head to the front of the church and start service.
Yeah.
So can we pick this up another time? And I just excused myself and went on up. And then at that point, I'm like, what in the world was that, Lord?
And the
You
first
know?
song and a half, it's just
Yes,
Cycling
it's
back
cycling
there.
back, and
Yeah.
you can't
And
look.
that's
You
all you
can't look
think
to the
about.
left
so
side.
I'm
That's what you're
looking
thinking about.
back, you know, and I'm looking to see how she's reacting, and she's got a bulletin up in her face, just like that. And I'm like, okay, Lord, get me through this, help me, you know. So there's things like that happen.
Sure.
You know, we had hymnals in the pews, and we started projecting lyrics and things like that, and eventually we had moved to the point where the hymnals, we pulled them out of the pews, and we hung on to them, had them in closets and things like that. That was a tough.
I was about to
tough
say
deal.
that must have been a hard one for certain people.
That was a tough one, and then we offered them to have hymnals to keep them.
Yeah.
But then eventually it just rolled
Yeah.
to the screen.
Yeah.
The part of the worship wars that was, I think, more difficult was genres. You know,
Yeah.
versus you know, hymns versus choruses versus lengthy songs.
And this is back before Spotify and Apple Music and
Oh,
YouTube.
yeah.
So
I mean,
people
we had-
only had like the radio.
we had cassettes.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
things like that. Hosanna tapes were coming out,
Yeah.
and they do a whole album on.
I want to say
Yeah.
that today, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think today people are more open to the newer because it's so easily accessible. That's what they hear. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, K-Love.
Exactly.
I would say music is more diversified
And that too.
in
Yeah.
the Christian space now.
I would
Yes,
also say
yeah.
too that, like, take your Christian contemporary radio station. What they're playing today is way more diverse
Yeah.
than what it was even 10 years ago.
Yes.
So if you listen
Yeah.
to the Christian radio station back in your day or whatever stuff
Yeah.
they were playing, listen to it now. I'm very surprised with what they play. I mean, I hear. And this sounds normal to y'all because y'all we're used to it today, but like hearing like Elevation Worship, Brandon Lake, stuff like that wasn't playing on contemporary Christian music even like 10
No,
years ago.
back then it was Hillsong. And,
Yeah.
and it wasn't really on the radios. It
Even
was
that.
It
One-
was in your cassette player in your car or in your home. They didn't really broadcast that.
And there
stuff
was
much.
a pretty strong divide between, Ray Boltz or Stephen Curtis Chapman
Yeah.
or whoever might have been on a Christian
W.
radio.
Smith.
And then whether it was Hosanna or Hillsong or there was almost
Hillsong was the hip.
they became
modern
like
stuff.
yeah.
they became like this choral literature. Like
Yeah.
they really came more through publishers for like church choir specials, at least
Yeah.
in my neck of the woods. That was kind of the avenue where they started, where it was like, oh, these are special performance pieces, but what we sing together are the tried and true. And I kind of opt out of this discussion because I grew up in the Baptist church
Right.
until 2014. I
Yeah.
was in a Baptist church where people would go on theological rampages about the evils of the repetition of modern music.
I mean, they still do today.
And I think they're really baseless. But I think the only thing I wanted to say was it seems to me that the only unchanging thing about the church is that it's constantly changing.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Evolving. And whether, you had a 16 years, and I think you had a particularly difficult season of transition.
You were in a difficult
You were in a
time.
cultural shift in the church
big
around
time.
the change of the millennium.
Technology even.
Yes.
Like you
Yes.
just, your,
Dude,
your
technology
story.
changes was huge.
Yes.
And we were never on the like bleeding edge of technology, but I feel like whenever I walked into Morningside, I was like, we always had a forward-thinking technology or something, or a creative implementation of a pretty standard technology. Like we've always been there or thereabouts. And I think it's interesting. Because I came in 2014, and I'm only 13, 12 years into your being there, but I can't even imagine your first decade, because the
How
way the church
vastly
looked when I
different.
walked in 2014. I see pictures of before the stage was raised, before that was painted, before
Right.
the soffits
Before
were built,
lights and-
before lights were there. And I it's hard for me to imagine that Morningside Assembly then was a place where there were hymnals and where there
Right.
was
And
an order of service.
we had difficulty with drums on the stage.
Oh,
Yes.
sure.
that was
Yes.
a big deal.
Yeah.
Going back to your roots, I grew up Presbyterian and Methodist.
Yeah.
So I came out of that traditionalism and so forth, and had a Pentecostal experience later on in life, in college, and so the technology thing. Yeah, we were cassette tapes to CDs to. You talk about tracks. You guys were using tracks, and
That was the other
Ableton.
can I was going to
Not
open.
split tracks.
Yeah.
Not split tracks.
Split tracks?
No, there was.
I haven't heard that in a
We
long
used
time.
some split tracks on some things,
I mean-
but then there was a time that I recorded my own backing track
Yes.
and played it on an iPad
Yep.
or iPod, just
Yeah.
a little iPod.
Yep.
And the team did it. We struggled with it for a little bit, but we got through it.
Yeah.
It was a Paul Baloche song, if I remember right.
Yeah.
But the technology. I'm not going to say jealous,
Oh,
but
yeah,
but
you've said
I'm
this before.
envious of
Yeah.
what you guys have
What
at
we
your
can do, right?
disposal today.
It's kind of crazy.
It's wild.
It is. It's
Even just in the few years I've been out of the game, I've seen some of the advances
There's
too,
been
where it's
some
like,
advancements.
it's really, it's great. But yeah, you think back 10 years ago and you go, man, what's interesting is how much more it demands of the volunteers and the players now, though.
Because they know what's out there.
That's
like,
true.
You can't
Yeah.
just show up with your instrument and just hang.
Yeah.
No, and we didn't have tracks to follow, so we were following each other, and then
Yep.
we didn't have a click track
Yep.
either at the time, so we followed the drummer.
Yep.
I look back to because I started when I was in high school in my home church in Houston, and we didn't have in-ear monitors, we didn't have click,
Yeah.
we didn't have
Yeah.
tracks. And I'm so used to how it is today. I mean, I can do it both. It's fine.
Yeah.
I can do it. But I look back and I'm like, how on earth did we ever like hear each other or stay together? And you know,
Dude,
it's crazy.
I've gone all the way back full circle because when Bill was moving to that executive role is when just before that is when we moved on to ClickTrack.
In-ears.
It's kind of deep
Just
in the
before
weeds.
that.
In-ears and
Yeah.
ClickTracks
Yeah,
was just
so for
before
those
that, and
who-
then we
yeah.
moved into like actual multi-tracks
Yeah.
when I was here, which was another layer because staying on the click is one thing, but like submitting to the arrangement of multi-tracks is even another thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like now I'm back full circle and at our tiny little church plant, it's like
You know, floor wedge in front
we
of
don't
you.
even have floor
Unplugged,
wedges.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're just unplugged. We're just playing really close to each other.
Yeah.
And
Sure,
we can hear
yeah.
each other. And,
Yeah.
and it's nice, but it's like part of me, I go back to like just yesterday night, I was at South Dakota's credentialing service and it was like full
full
tracks,
thing,
full
yeah.
band. I'm back on in-ears. I'm messing with the mix. I'm like trying to balance it out. I'm like, man,
It's been a minute.
I forgot this
Yeah.
muscle. Like I've got to remember to flex that. But I can't even imagine, like, because you've got a front row seat to all of this change. Maybe this is a good question. What have you learned about the process of change in a church? Watching the last 20 years of not only worship styles, but worship technologies, church culture move forward in 20 years.
You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'd say that's part of the way to sum it up, because it's just going to continue.
Yeah.
It
And
is,
it gets
and
faster.
yeah, it is for sure. You know, music and technology just. Gosh, the big transition for us in the time was "Shout to the Lord" by Hillsong at that time, you know, and then everybody loved that song. And then
That was a world changer.
It was. And then, you know, we had Hillsong, then we had Jesus Culture that came along a little
Yeah.
bit later, you know, with Kim Walker Smith and those guys. And then now you're talking about Brandon Lake now, and you know, we got Maverick City, and
I'll say that too, that the other change today is there's a ton more like artists. Like back when I used to listen to contemporary music radio in Houston, 89.3 KSBJ, God listens, right? I could, sorry, I couldn't help myself.
That was a real like ad break there.
that
like,
was that
brought
was
to you by.
Contemporary Christian music radio, whatever. There was a time when I was younger, when I was a student, and I could listen to KSBJ Radio, which is the Christian station in Houston, and I could name every single artist, every single album out there. Okay, when I turn on even K-Love now, I can't name them all. There's so many out there. And not just that, because technology is advancing and being so easily accessible, a lot of churches on their own are recording their own stuff, and then that stuff gets out. There's like so much to keep. Like I'm like, wait, who's Belonging Co? What is you know? And there's just so many options out there. I
Yeah.
feel like that's just going to continue to also exponentially grow. You know?
I would assume so. What's interesting, and I want to like find the other side of the coin too, because for as many changes as there have been, and for as diverse and broad and divergent as music and worship music and the whole church expression is now, like every church has those different artists they resonate with and they end up incorporating. But I also think that there are a lot of things about worship that haven't changed.
correct.
So
Yeah.
we're you know, we need to navigate through change well. There's always like, because the methods always change, but the mission never changes, right? So what are some things about worship at Restoration Church today that have been the same ever since you arrived at Morningside Assembly in 2001?
Conversation with God through music.
Yeah.
You know, it's more about vertical songs than horizontal songs.
Whether it's a hymn or a chorus
Yeah.
or
Yep.
elevation, whatever.
You can have proclamation songs about this
Sure.
is who our God is, but it really worship comes down to the vertical conversation between you and Him, and the song in your heart coming out and being offered to Him. You know, I was going to say just a minute ago, you're talking about technology and transitions and things, and vinyl has
come
made
back.
full circle. Yeah. So it's interesting how that technology is.
It's funny.
Is
Some things come back
yes.
that you're like, I didn't think that would come back. And it's
Right.
back.
It's another pendulum swing, right?
Yep.
We went more and more digital, and then all of a sudden everything's streaming, and a physical vinyl pressing
Yeah.
from a master
Yeah.
comes back. I think it's like you stretch the rubber band so far and everyone's like, but I want something real to hold on to. I want to see the grooves. I want to know
Right.
where the song changes are because of this. You
Musical
know?
styles too. We touched on this on your episode, but
yeah.
we were saying that a trend is artists today will write their stuff and they'll throw in a chorus of a hymn. So like
Right.
it's like, oh,
Yeah.
hymns are old school. We don't want to do those. Well, now they're slowly creeping back. You
Right.
know, it's like a mashup, and
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's a cultural thing too. You know, there was a church in Kansas City. They're a Methodist church, and they built a brand new building and sanctuary and everything like it. They pulled their people to see what they wanted because they were in a full blacked out dark auditorium with lights and everything, and they voted. And it was younger generations in
Yes.
the 30s
Yes.
and 40s, 20s, 30s, 40s. They wanted stained glass.
Yeah.
They wanted
Yeah.
pews.
That's coming
they
back.
want
I think in the next 10 years we're going to turn the lights back on in church.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We're gonna come back. And it's gonna be
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking at a building. I'm looking at. We meet portably in a middle school gym right now. So our current worship space is a middle school gym. So it can't possibly get any worse. But when I start to look at where do I want the future of our worship experience to look like at Beacon, I don't imagine the black box that church has been
Yeah.
in the last 20 years.
Yep.
It had its moment. It had its purpose. I think it helped with streaming initially.
Definitely.
Like all the rules about broadcast television where you want to have this certain kind of background, a certain kind of call out. Like we started kind of morphing those onto the church when live streaming, which that's a whole avenue of technology
That's
we haven't
another
even
whole thing. Yeah.
talked about.
Gosh,
because
yes.
you were probably
You
carbon
were-
copying
Yeah.
cassettes and CDs, and then all of a sudden it's like boom, we're
Then
to the world.
we immersed ourselves into that.
Yeah.
When Pastor Johnny came.
I remember.
You were early adopters.
Y'all were, yeah, I will
last
say that Morningside was really ahead. It was pre-COVID, and y'all were streaming. And I remember when I was dating Tori at Evangel, when we missed church and we were sick or whatever, she's like, "I'm just gonna watch my church online." And I was like, "You can do that," you know? And I was like, "Whoa!" It was y'all were ahead of the game. But yeah, continue. When he
were.
came, was he the one that initiated that?
Yes. You know, we had some purchases of things that we wanted to do in technology wise, and then he says, came to me and said, "Hey, what are your thoughts, Jim? Can we switch these funds that we want to do to buy a camera system and look at
Man, that started
broadcasting?"
so much.
It did, and back in that time, we had to run through a streaming service and get a separate URL and things like that. The guy that was head of this was amazing. He would watch our service on Sunday mornings, and if we had technical issues, we'd give him permission. He'd chime right in on the computer and fix
Yeah.
it and bit rate and
like a
everything
team
like that.
viewer kind of thing.
Yeah,
You would
it
hop
was
in.
amazing.
Yeah.
And nowadays, you throw it up on YouTube or on Facebook, and you don't have to have that kind of service
Yeah.
anymore. But
Yeah.
I was amazed always at how that reached the masses. I mean, we
They used to
had
get the report, right?
yes, we had people in like United Emirates
Yeah.
that watched us faithfully, and then I think somebody called Pastor Johnny one day. I can't remember where she was from, but halfway around the world.
Yeah.
And said, "Thank you for your services. That
Yeah.
I watch them on Sundays."
You never know who's watching. He
You
always
don't.
reminds us.
Yeah.
Even today,
Yeah.
he was sharing a
Yes.
story about someone who recently joined our church in person for a couple weeks, and so Pastor Johnny's very good at connecting with people. Speaking of 80-20,
Very much so.
he's very
yeah.
good at that. And he was connecting with her and said, "Hey, nice to meet you and your husband, blah blah blah." And said, "How long have you been coming here?" She's like, "Well, we've been here physically for like 2 or 3 weeks." She goes, "But we've been watching for the past year."
Yep.
And so it's just, you never know who's watching.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just amazing to me. Again, this was because of the pandemic. Now every church had no choice. And I'll put it this way too. Morningside was ahead of the game when they streamed. My church in Springfield, they weren't streaming. Now they fully were capable of doing that because we were a pretty big church and they had really tech savvy people. We could have totally done it, but for some reason we just didn't. And I always
like
asked like, why aren't we
recording and
I said, yeah,
posting?
I was like, why aren't we streaming? We
Yeah.
didn't. And they're
Yeah.
like, the worship director, music director at the time was like, we just don't have the capability yet. And at that point, I wasn't in ministry, so I didn't understand you need all these things.
Sure.
But once COVID hit, that's when they started streaming.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, if it weren't for the pandemic, and this is the case for a lot of churches, my home church in Houston, they would have never done that. They and now, of course, just like every other church, they stream as well.
course.
And so it's crazy that you start.
Yeah.
It's your fault. No, you started
it's all
that
your
during
fault.
your time, and that's still
Yep.
going and still evolving. And
Yeah.
we're still seeing changes and updates and all that stuff. And it's
Yeah.
crazy to me seeing that every church does it now.
Yeah.
What used to be like a luxury, every church was forced to figure it out.
Right.
you know?
Yeah. And I mean, even it used to be like, I remember seeing some like fly on the wall camera
Yeah.
church streams, and now like I see churches in Sioux Falls have this like automated slider
I
cams.
know,
and,
the
like,
things they
Productions,
do.
yeah,
My
production
gosh.
values
Stuff like that's-
really
it's
gone high.
crazy.
That is really great.
Yeah.
But just to circle back on the church building thing,
Yep.
like I think it's going to be interesting to watch because
We'll sit down 10
we're
years from now.
seeing more and more churches through live streams.
Yep.
But we went through this kind of black box, blackout phase, and I'm interested to see where does it go next because I think it's true that over the last few decades that we've all been involved in worship in the American church has moved away from the traditional what church looked like 50 years ago. Everyone knew what a church looked like 50 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The building, you could have a couple of different things, but
Yeah.
you can
Mostly
walk
the
into a
same,
church and
yeah.
go, this was a church designed 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And they knew exactly what they were doing in the 70s, and everyone looked kind
Yeah.
of the same. And then all of a sudden, 50 years later, it's like this church was built 50 years ago, and how they blacked that out. We blacked that out. We blacked that out. We've got cameras here, here, here. Got it. Cool. I'm really interested to see, though, like, I think more and more people are hungry for the church to be a beautiful place again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the black box, it was cool. And it actually, I think it really helped the culture of worship develop.
I agree.
Because
Yeah, I agree with that.
you're able to
Focus.
kind of,
Yeah.
you put light on what you want to focus on, and you
Yeah.
draw people in. And like,
My more introverted wife agrees. She
Yeah.
says she
Absolutely.
likes that atmosphere because it makes her feel more comfortable to
Absolutely.
worship freely.
yep. But I think the next step for the American church is to turn the lights back on.
We're going to paint everything white. No.
And to keep worshiping. I don't know about, like, it's not going to look like Kim Kardashian's house. You
And
ever
there's,
seen Just white everywhere?
Fuzzy carpet.
there's a movement too to get back to liturgy
Yes. Yep.
in the church.
We've sort of somewhat
Yeah, but-
tiptoed that line.
Yeah.
We have a scripture reading every week.
Right.
Nothing
Yep.
wrong with that. Okay.
Yep.
I mean, it's the word of God, right?
Yeah.
But yes, you're right. That's kind of a movement.
Well,
So
there again, constant change.
it's
Yes.
always
And for
changing.
always.
For some of
Always.
us, it would be wildly uncomfortable.
Yep.
For like, I grew up with that prayer book. I grew up with that, where you showed up and it was the same thing
Yep.
every single service. It was so stiff and wooden.
Yep.
And it felt like we finally broke free and we were following the Spirit. And now we're following the Spirit right back to like these beautiful traditions that have been there for thousands of years.
That's how it is.
I don't
Again, that's
know.
how the church world is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, things come back and all that. But our final few minutes here, I had to ask you this question. I know you got a ton, and I'll ask you the same one. What is a super embarrassing moment on the platform? You've probably got a ton. And you've told me multiple great stories,
Yeah.
whether it's a technical glitch or something you went through. I'm not trying to tell you which story to tell, but maybe something happened to you physically. 16 years, lots has happened, right?
I don't know if I can pick just one.
Yeah,
That's
I
fine.
was gonna say,
Do it.
There's a lot.
Share a couple.
there. I remember. I remember one embarrassing moment was I started service 10 minutes late
Is that the embarrassing part? No.
because I was in my office and got involved in
Uh-huh.
some technical thing or whatever,
Yep.
and looked at my watch and
went,
yes, and walking in and there's actually it was Pastor Johnny.
yeah.
And he said, "You all right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." I said, I'm sorry. I lost track of time. I got involved in something in my office." He said, "It's okay." And one thing about Pastor John, he's so gracious.
Yeah, very
you know.
forgiving.
Yes.
It's
very
amazing
much
I'm
so.
still employed here, to be honest.
Well, like all of us are,
Yeah.
But that to me was one. Ben, why don't you share one? I'll come back with another one. Maybe you're.
Oh, well, I mean, there was the classic one was I was in the middle of talking. I tried to say something about the heart of the Father.
Yes.
And I literally just said the fart and just stopped.
You just
And
stopped.
I stopped, like my brain buffered for a second. I went, the heart of the Father. It's one of those things where you just like your whole nervous system becomes a 5-alarm fire, and you're like, I just said fart in front of the whole church.
Yeah.
Okay, I got one that will go with that.
Do it. Yeah.
You remember Y2K, year
Oh, yes.
2000? Everything was supposed to shut down.
Yeah.
Everything's supposed to just come to a halt and everything. And we had church the next day, and I got up in front of the congregation. I said, "Isn't it wonderful?" I said that here we are in Y2K, the next century, or 2000. I said the lights come on. The music still works. The toilet still flushes. God's still on the throne.
He's still on the throne.
The throne.
After the toilet flushes.
Had no idea I really said that, and then half a dozen people come up to you after service and
Still
say
on the
that.
throne, huh?
That's hilarious, But yeah, it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
That's almost
a lot of.
That's almost a we all have cracks and we leak.
Yes,
That's a Pastor Johnny
That's
quote.
that's almost it.
He'll be on soon as well, and now that you mentioned that, I'm gonna make sure to have a list of, we call them Johnny-isms.
Oh yeah.
Which that's you have a note on your phone, and what's funny is talk about technology. He shared that note with me, so every time he updates it, I get a notification. Bill Davis has updated Johnny-isms, and I'm like, ooh,
Nice.
and so we'll have to read those when he's
Oh,
on.
absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I have an embarrassing story for you.
A very nice about
And actually,
me?
all three of us were involved in this.
Okay.
So we
Okay.
were on the same platform, same worship team for a celebration of life service. And we were doing a funeral, a celebration
Oh
of life.
yeah.
I
We
remember.
know.
Okay.
We're trying to think
Yeah.
of what
So
time this would be.
It was very recent, and we were on the family asked for a worship set, and so we put together a team. You were on acoustic and vocals. I was on keys and vocals, and you were in the drum cage playing drums.
okay, yeah.
And so we rehearse, everything goes great, and then we're waiting for this celebration to start, and we're just in the green room hanging out, and then Ben's like, "I'm gonna go use the restroom." Oh yeah. And so we're there hanging out. I'm like, "Okay,
Yeah.
3 minutes, 2 minutes, we've got to go. It's time." And there was a lot of people there. Like we had
was a packed
overflow.
house.
It was really full.
I know which one you're talking about now.
And so I was like, "We've got to go. It's time." And Pastor Johnny on a Sunday, like I said, he's forgiving if something happens, but for Celebration of Life, he's usually like, "We got to start
Right.
now."
Yeah, we need to be on
And
time.
so we go out on the platform, and Ben is nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
I'm like,
So
I'm like,
I looked down at my clock. Normally, like the culture around here is we have a countdown timer. We start
Yeah,
right at
you have
0.
a cue, yeah.
I looked at my watch. And I go, we're like 3 to 4 minutes before service. The layout, if you don't know it, is there's kind of the green room, tech room area. Right around the corner, there are a couple little bathrooms. It's 8 feet away, and then it's another 8 feet to my side of stage entrance. And I go, cool. I've got 3-4 minutes. I'm gonna duck over here. I'm gonna go to the bathroom. But we have what are called wireless in-ear monitors. So I have a wireless pack that's clipped to my belt, and then I have ears where I can hear everything that's happening.
and let
in
me
here.
preface this by saying we have these. I press a button on my iPad and it starts the song we're gonna play.
Yeah.
And we have
Click track,
these
and a little-
clicks that give us our tempo.
And there's a little lady that says, intro
Yeah.
to
Yes.
3,
So
4.
I've programmed very recently those clicks that are just click. I've programmed it so when I press one, now we hear a man's voice say "one" really loud.
Yes.
All right, continue.
So I drank a lot of water, and so I needed to use the facilities briefly. Let's just put it that
Right.
way. And all I know is that I look down at my clock. I go, cool, still 2 minutes left. Maybe 60 seconds for the entire experience. Put my in-ear in, turn the pack on, and I hear 1, 2, and I hear you may be seated. 1, 2, 3, and I go,
It's like, where is he?
because I know I'm leading the first song.
You were leading.
You were
or
leading.
you're on
Yes.
it or something.
It was one of those things where I sprinted to the door, stood still, went, and then tried to open it and try to waltz in gracefully.
I was like, okay, there he is.
The classic thing is you try never to make it look like it's
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
fully on fire as a person, but my whole body was like, I didn't even think I was gonna be able to sing the first line.
Yeah.
So
I was
worked
like-
up.
And I was getting the look from you, like, because I can see him from the
Yeah.
drum cage.
Yep.
He turns around and does one of these.
Well, we were all three standing there,
Yep.
and then I'm like, gotta go to the bathroom. I depart, and apparently the second I depart out the door, Johnny must have started walking the family
We're
in
like,
the
we
back
gotta
door.
go. Yeah.
And then you
we
guys
had to
just
go.
had to go and carry the room, and I think I was supposed to intro. Yeah, it was that was one
that
of
was
those
really funny.
where
well,
it-
in the moment, it was not funny.
In the
'Cause
moment,
the
I
room
was
is full of people, and they're
stressful.
standing,
Yeah.
and we're
They're waiting
first,
for
and I'm like, okay,
Yes.
we got.
fill time.
And I walk in, you're just like vamping. You started saying something. I fully blacked it out at this point. I don't know. I walk in, plug in my guitar, put my capo on, and I'm like, within 25 seconds of wrapping things up in the bathroom, I'm like singing line one,
Yeah,
just
it's
right
funny.
there.
Yeah.
It was funny.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, this is very unique, like we said, that we're still around and that we've been able to be on the same team together as well.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Which I want to quickly add before we go here that for a while, correct me if I'm wrong, when you took your position, you weren't on the platform for a while, correct?
Correct.
Because you
Yeah,
had to fully
correct.
do executive pastor stuff, which is
Right.
a lot.
And I wanted to give him opportunity
course.
to
Yeah. Yep.
to get his feet and legs
I was-
under him. So
And
for
then
that.
you approached him for something that he still does now, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it had been probably a year or two, and I'd been given the directive to kind of relaunch the Well. The Well, our Wednesday night
Our
service,
Wednesday
had kind
night
of dwindled down
prayer
to like a
services and
really
worship.
chill acoustic thing, where it's basically just me most of the time. And Johnny was like, I really want that to be a full
You
team.
want a full team.
And I'm doing the head count of like where everybody's at on Wednesday nights. We had a ton of people that had gone down and started playing in the youth group,
Yeah.
and the youth band was full of adults that were just rocking out.
You know what's funny about that? Sorry, I'll let you. I'm
go,
so
go.
sorry. But when I got here, we had a full team, and I thought it'd be really cool and unique if we had acoustic sets for the Well.
Yeah.
Not even knowing that's how
Yeah.
it started. Sorry.
Well,
All right.
it kind of
Continue.
ebbed and flowed
Yeah.
over the years, but I was like I knew I needed a few things.
Yep.
I needed a certain number of musicians, but I needed musicians who were smart, who understood how to flow, and how to fill a
Yeah,
room.
'cause it's-
and I was looking around at keyboard players, like racking my brain. I'm like, well, it's like, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Like Bill could just sit behind a keyboard for an hour
Yeah.
and hold the room. Why not ask Bill? But so it was this great thing where it was totally a full circle thing.
Yeah.
Where you got
Right.
to.
Yeah.
It's cool to like be the guy on the platform and then walk away a little bit and then just get to come back and the pressure's off.
Do it in a
And
yeah.
you
It's
actually
not
get to
you.
be creative.
And you enjoy that.
I
right?
love that.
Playing on
I
it.
love the supportive role that I've played
Yes.
for both of you.
Yeah. It's great.
It has been. And to allow you guys to just do your thing, but support you.
But
in
you're
that.
still there. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of music pastors don't get that, and I
You do
wish they
have-
did.
Yeah, it's a really unique luxury that you get to enjoy, where the
Yeah.
pressure's not on you.
Yep.
You still get to do what you love and what
Yeah.
you're really good at.
Yep.
And like it's on us, you know.
Yeah.
But it's funny because you're a keyboard player, and this is the last story I'll share. But there was a Sunday when all of our drummers were going to be unavailable, and I was like, what am I going to do? And I remember I told you about that. I said, what do I do? Do I use tracks? Do I just do nothing? And you're like, well, I play drums.
drums.
And I was like,
No, you don't.
do you?
Do you play drums or do you like play?
So here's what happened. After that conversation, I went to your daughter who attends here.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, and I explained the situation. I said, your dad claims he plays drums. Is that true? She's like, oh, yeah, he's really good. He studied that in college. I was like, really? And I got excited. She goes, yeah. And then she's like, it'll be kind of like this, Days of Elijah. And she starts, and I was like, oh, no.
No, no.
Oh, no. And so I don't
That
think I
was right
told
for
you
a
this,
comeback.
but I actually met with Pastor Johnny. Did I tell you this part?
No.
I said, Johnny, I was all nervous, you know. I was like, we don't have a drummer for Sunday. I said, here's two options. I said, I can use tracks, which is not as great, but it'll work. I said, Bill says he plays drums. And Johnny's like, I trust your judgment. He's like, it's your job, you know, do whatever. So I was like, okay. And so I was like, hey, Bill, can you hop in the cage real quick and play a few bars? And sure enough, it was great, which I want to take this opportunity too, to tell you, and this is funny because I'm like way younger, but like the amount of like growth you've had in the drum cage, like is like phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like,
Chops came back.
Yeah, well, I told,
it-
it's taken a while to get my chops back.
yeah.
You know?
And again, styles are very different than the last time you
Yeah.
used to play regularly, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just so funny how, you know, the Lord keeps bringing you back to the platform, you know?
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
cool. But I mean, that's your gift, that's your calling, you know? I don't know about you guys, but I've already told the Lord, as long as I'm alive and breathing and the opportunity comes, I will play, I will sing, I will
Yeah.
serve. So this is a lifelong thing for me.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be paid for it or full time, that's whatever. But as long as there's breath in me and I'm physically, mentally able to, I'm going to play for the Lord, you know,
Yeah.
on a
Yeah.
team or whatever. And so I think that's really cool and it's really unique.
I
This
used to
thing we have
joke
here.
with I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I used to joke with the line from Godfather, the movie. As soon as I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
True.
It's
so true.
Absolutely.
It's so true.
But it's been great. It's been good. And I guess I have to ask, how are my drumming skills now? I mean,
that's what I'm
yes,
saying.
yeah.
They're so great.
Yeah.
Seriously, I'm not just saying that. Seriously,
I'd
say that if the cameras were off too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. No,
but-
I appreciate
but
that because
I will
but
say
it's hilarious because I always tease you too. I tell you
Yep.
that I play the contra bass flute
Gosh.
too, but I don't.
Haven't needed that yet.
I don't. Yeah.
if I do, I will call you first. But I will say it's like night and day. This past week when you played compared to the very first
time
Sunday
I
you were in
stepped
the
in the
cage,
stage, yeah.
which
Back
Yeah, I was pretty rusty.
again back to the 80-20 thing. I could have been prideful and said I don't think he can play or he's not going to
Right.
match the style. Let's just
Right.
do tracks.
Yeah.
But then you would have never had the opportunity to grow and all
Right.
that. And now you're in the cage all the
Yeah.
time, and
Yep.
it's great. And you say you have more fun playing drums than keys sometimes, right?
I
it's a little
do.
more physical, right?
Yeah, I do. It's a
Yeah.
great outlet, and I really appreciate both of you using me and being able to use my talents
Yeah.
that the Lord
Absolutely.
blessed me with, because that was one of the things in moving into the executive pastor role. I was like struggling with.
What do I
Right.
do with this?
Yes,
Yeah.
because the Lord gifted me
Yeah.
in so many things, and I'm like, how am I going to be able to use this for your glory, Lord?
Mm-hmm.
And then you guys came to me, and I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord. Now
Yeah.
you've got a plan.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
think
been
it's-
great, and I really appreciate you guys
Absolutely.
doing
Kind of reminds me of David. So I've been thinking a lot about David, little shepherd boy on the hillside, is anointed to be king. And so he has this like calling on his life but he's anointed to be king, but he's assigned to be a shepherd.
Yeah, that's great.
Right.
And then he's anointed
Yeah.
to be king, but he's assigned to be just playing on the harp in the corner of Saul's court.
it. Right.
And there must have been a musical thing he was doing on the hillside as a shepherd. He must have been doing that in the court. But then when he became king, even when he moved beyond the musician role, you want to tell me that all of those psalms, like my guess is he was a king
Yeah.
and sitting in the corner of his court being like, I gotta go play the harp
need to
a little
play.
bit.
Yeah.
I
Right.
gotta
Right.
play. I gotta
Yes.
sing. I gotta write. Like
Yes.
you can't just let go
Yeah.
of that thing. It's a mode of self-expression that is so necessary once you kind of flip that switch and know how to use it.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that the Lord has allowed all of us to continue using our gifts. You're in the assignment right now.
Yeah.
But even though that's not maybe our assignment, we still both get to use that. We're still like anointed
Yeah.
for that purpose in instances, even when
Yeah.
even though our assignment has moved on from what you're at right
Yeah.
now. So I think it's just cool to see that biblical picture kind of played out.
I think the other spiritual lesson too is, when the Lord asks you to move on, so to speak, just trust Him.
Yeah.
Because He will
Yes.
bring back and give you the desires of your
Yeah.
heart.
Yes.
You were like, music's my calling, but He's opening this executive door. You
Yeah.
did it, and for a while you
Yeah.
weren't on the platform, but then Ben approached, and now you're once again doing that.
Yep.
Same thing for me. I'll be honest; it was very hard to leave the classroom because I love teaching.
Yes.
I really do.
Yeah.
I said, Lord, I believe you opened this door for me, so I said yes. Came here, and then I think it was 1 or 2 young students asked to take piano lessons. Started with just 1, and now I have 5
Yeah.
students.
Great,
And
yeah.
they come all, and I still get to teach. It's
Yep.
the Lord's way of, I don't want to use the word rewarding, but like you followed my call. This is what you love to
Give
do.
you- yeah, give you
I'm
the
gonna-
desires of your
Yep.
heart.
God,
It's
and
amazing.
He's not going to waste
No.
what you walked through.
What He's given you, what He's
Right.
equipped you with.
Whatever. I mean, there's a reason why Bill had a custom wood making business, and then all of a sudden we need cabinets made
That's
up
true.
for that.
That's
And
true.
Anytime something's broken around here, Johnny's like, "Hey, Bill,
Bill.
what are you?"
Yeah.
The Lord is creative,
Yeah.
and He'll find ways to use your giftings.
Whatever you've
whatever
walked
it
through,
is.
it's not going to be wasted.
It's not. The Lord
whether
will find a way to
whether
use it.
you're
you
a French horn player or
Yep.
like a guy who mows lawn. I don't know. I haven't figured out the lawn mowing thing yet.
Not yet, right?
We're gonna find the full circle moment in that, but
Eventually.
or whether it's music coming back around when you're in an executive role, like
Yeah.
He's not going to waste it.
It's really cool. So thank you guys for hanging out for a little bit
Thanks for
today.
having us.
Bill, thank you so much. We'll have you again, and you can elaborate your story a little
Sounds
more.
great.
And
Yeah,
we'll
this
be
has been
here.
a lot of fun with you guys.
Yeah, thanks for
you.
being here. And thank you for one more thing, allowing us to get some of this equipment. We used most stuff laying around, but I went to Bill. I said, hey,
Yeah.
we want to start this podcast thing. It's
Yeah.
not just a thing that we want to start.
Yeah.
It's a ministry, and we believe it's.
Yeah.
And people have come to me and said they've
Yep.
appreciate this. They look forward to it,
Yeah.
and they've we're trying to spread hope and healing in this way.
Yes.
So thank you for
Yes.
letting us do this. It's been great, Ben. thank you for coming. You're around.
for
I'm
having
sure
me.
you'll be back again.
I'm sure. I'm always around
yeah.
a little bit.
Awesome.
All right.
So thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to follow Restoration Podcast on Spotify and Apple. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe.